Hi, everybody. This is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and these are your horoscopes for February of 2019. So this is the Sun and Rising Sign horoscope for Virgo, and I'll go ahead and share the screen. Oh, we still have, there we go. And we'll go ahead and dive in. So this month is all about the aspects between Mars and Pluto and Mars and Uranus. The first half of the month is really dominated by the connection between these two planets. So, for example, on February 2nd, Mars will make a square with Pluto, and then between your 8th house and 5th house. And then on the 12th, around the 12th, 13th of the month, Mars will then conjoin with Uranus in Aries. This is a major moment because the planet Uranus has been in the sign of Aries for a very long time, engaging in a long-standing square with Pluto in Capricorn, and it is now moving on. Next month, it's going to be in Taurus, and never again the two shall meet from Aries and Capricorn in our lifetimes. So this is a culminating moment for the planet Uranus, the last official period of the two planets being brought together in their square by another transiting planet. And it's happening as Uranus is about to change signs. It has a powerful cumulative effect. I would say the key words for the month are confrontation and catharsis. The beginning of the month features a square from Mars in your 8th house, which is related to death and endings and fear and anxiety. And it's also, in a sense, the house that's related to karmic debts. It happens. Sometimes it's a small thing like having to pay a speeding ticket. Sometimes the 8th house exacts a more severe toll, like losing a loved one. It really depends on individual's individual's chart, but the indication of this month for Virgos is that there is a little bit of a karmic build that's going to be due. You're going to be facing the music a little bit. However, with Pluto in Capricorn in the 5th house, which was traditionally called the house of good fortune, something good is going to come out of this. The 5th house was traditionally associated basically with anything that brought joy in an accidental manner. Accidental meaning not really through any big choice or plan or plot of your own, but just by the winds of fate. So interesting that there's a moment of confrontation, catharsis, depth, and intensity, a little bit of a karmic bill due at the beginning of the month, but something good may come of it, or it may be in your best interest to have to deal with whatever you're going to have to deal with in the first few days of February. So I'm going to keep it simple like that for now, because you get lost down the wormhole if you try to say a lot more sometimes about a transit as deep and intense and confrontational as Mars-Pluto. You've got the god of war squaring off with the lord of the underworld. This usually means that there is a combination of confrontational energy, whether it's within ourselves or in relationships or out in the world, and the kinds of things that we confront are the things that are hidden from us or that are pent up inside and need to be released and exposed so that healing can happen. It's a simple way of putting it. Now, what's going to happen from this point forward is on February 12th, 13th, what you're going to see is Mars will then go into a conjunction with Uranus. This may be another moment of catharsis, confrontation, a karmic bill being due. It's Mars-Uranus in the 8th house, something a little unexpected, something a little erratic, an unintended consequence, a conflict that is more powerful or severe than you would have anticipated, things escalating quicker than you might like. There's a good red flag around this transit and these transits this month. In the collective, for example, we're likely to see more public acts of violence or intensity or political drama. Everything's going to ratchet up and escalate for the first half of February. But this moment is that kind of defiant and erratic and potentially very aggressive kind of Mars-Uranus. It has that aggressive Mars-Uranus quality to it. So you definitely want to put this one on your calendar. Circle this as well. This is not a time to be stupid. Just whatever you're going to do, just, let cool heads prevail, as they say. So watch for this dynamic in the 8th house. Now, sometimes the 8th house will also indicate to us a Mars-Uranus transit in the 8th house, for example, may allow us to face or confront something that we're afraid of. And that could be a very good thing. So the breakthrough in terms of what has power over us in the negative sense and sort of standing up to it, finding our courage, having a moment of breakthrough personally, where we have the power to say no to something, or to separate or say goodbye to something that has been holding us back in some way. So a confrontation with our own shadows and demons this month, if you're a Virgo. I say our, but I'm not a Virgo or anything, but I think that you could say that this is a month where Virgo Sun, Virgo Rising, you could also look at this as a moment of confronting your own demons and saying enough is enough. Okay. Now, there are a few other transits this month that I have my eye on that I think of as incredibly important. One of them is the new moon, which is happening on February 4th, landing in your 6th house. So the 6th house is related to sickness and drudgery and toil and work, and sometimes it was traditionally called the joy of Mars, and it was a house of conflict and bad fortune. So a 6th house new moon suggests to me that, again, this month isn't an easy one for Virgos. There's work ahead. There's a little bit of toil ahead. There's trudging through something. But the 6th house is also related to, the fights that we have to fight in life for the sake of health in the face of cruelty or suffering or injustice in the world. The 6th house was traditionally related to military training, was said to be the joy of Mars. So the 6th house has another similar theme of recognizing, okay, it's like the Queen song. I just saw the movie about Freddie Mercury, and that just came out. Another one bites the dust, right? Has that feeling this month of like, how do you get back up and keep going when you're getting knocked down, or when things are happening that are a little bit more challenging? And this new moon plants, I think, a positive seed in this house of transformation and change. Notice that the ruler of this new moon, Saturn, is in the 5th house of good fortune. That alone tells me that, yeah, there's some difficulties coming, but there's an underlying developmental process happening here, that if you're willing to do the work, willing to kind of look yourself in the mirror and say, okay, I know what I have to do to fix this, or I know what's needed of me to make it through this particular stage of the journey, that there is support there for you. And overall, good things can come out of a little bit of drudgery this month. Now, going forward, there's a couple of other transits that I have my eye on that I think of as, I think are going to be pretty important. You can actually see right at the beginning of the month, another transit that's sneaky is Venus is making from Sagittarius, is making a square to Chiron in Pisces. The 4th house, 7th house dynamic at the very beginning of the month, home and domestic matters, love and relationships in the home, and maybe your romantic partnerships. You see kind of both are being highlighted through Venus in the 4th and Chiron in the 7th. Maybe some pain and growing pains and lessons and deeper vulnerability and healing available to you at home and in relationship area of your chart this month at the very beginning as well. So that's kind of a sneaky transit, but it's there in the mix of the Mars-Pluto dynamic as well. Okay, anyway, going past that new moon on February 4th, you can just notice, again, just stand back and be like, wow, there's a lot of transits happening like the first 5 days of the month. Okay, so then on February 12th, 13th, you're going to see Mars get together with Uranus. I've already talked about that, but just to highlight that again, that's where there's that another sort of very powerful moment of confrontation and intensity and the unexpected, a little bit more erratic and wild, that transit. Uranus transit can be very awakening, though. So again, I think the possibility of being like sort of jolted back to your senses, if you need to be this month, is there for you. Excuse me. All right. So when you go forward a little bit more on the 14th, Mars will then enter Taurus and move into your ninth house of religion, higher education, spirituality, long journeys. It will be there for the next 40 plus days, suggesting a deeper level of confrontation or conflict, Mars, or intensity and kind of that feeling of drive and will and desire. It's the intentionality of Mars pointing in the direction of your beliefs, the higher power, the higher governing principles of your life, and more of an intense focus on those things for the next 40 days, starting around February 14th. Now, when you go forward from there, I have the 18th circled next for a few reasons. One, Venus will get together with Saturn. In the fifth house, this has the feeling to me of a very positive or beneficial moment. Again, it's in the house of good fortune, pleasure, happiness, creativity, joy. It's also related to pregnancy and children. But it's a moment. So I think overall, it's a moment signaling something good happening around the 18th, something beneficial for you. I think it'll have to do with either coming to terms on some kind of an agreement, receiving some kind of benefit, or becoming clear about the need to separate or get out of some kind of relationship or agreement. The reason for this is that Venus is, of course, the goddess of love and harmony, and Saturn is the god of boundaries and opposition. So coming to terms on something around the 18th, I think it's a beneficial thing. It's going to be producing joy and happiness in your life, but it may have a kind of sobering effect. It may be a kind of stark moment, a kind of make or break moment, kind of a decisive finality to it. So then if you go on February 18th, the other thing that's happening is Chiron is changing signs into Aries, where it will stay for the better part of the next decade in your 8th house. This is interesting. Chiron's been in your 7th house of relationships for a very long time. And now it's moving into the 8th house, which sometimes will focus on other people's money, other people's resources, partner or spouse's income or money, and issues of wounding around those topics. Sometimes that means if you're the breadwinner, you're going to be visiting topics of self-worth and how your self-worth is tied into being a provider. Other times it will have to do with visiting themes of being taken care of and not being able to provide your own income or your own kind of being able to stand on your own, and the wounds around that. Even if it's not, a lot of people are in relationships where they're not the breadwinner. It doesn't mean that it's the relationship needs to end, but it could be a sign that, there's self-esteem issues and things we have to look at a much deeper level when we're in a more dependent position for a long time. But those kind of issues of independence and dependence around finances and resources and relationships could be a real theme. Visiting those themes for the sake of healing, visiting wounds around those themes, but also the topics of death, mortality, endings, and again, kind of that feeling of the karmic bills that are due. And sometimes that takes place in terms of health, in terms of our relationships, in terms of career, facing what we don't want to face, but learning from the experience. Chiron, the healer, and the teacher entering your 8th house for a good while to come, right around February 18th. Then we have on the 19th, the full moon in Virgo in your home sign in your 1st house. However, it's also opposing a Mercury and Neptune conjunction taking place right around the same time with your ruling planet Mercury currently in its fall in the 7th house. One of the things that I think very important all month long is the topic of honesty, deception, and communication issues in relationships. Are you really showing yourself to others right now, or are you hiding? Are other people manipulating you, or are other people hiding their real intentions? It's a time to be very honest and to avoid being manipulated or manipulating others emotionally. Using your best better discernment and judging situations as carefully as possible, especially in relationships right now. There is a moment of finality around this full moon, a moment of something reaching completion, and possibly, again, the idea, especially with Venus having just conjoined Saturn, around the same time, Venus going towards Pluto, relationships are reaching a kind of a critical mass where something has to shift or change. It could be work relationships, contracts, love relationships, but something is reaching a moment of finality. And you want to be as clear-headed as possible about it with your ruling planet, with Neptune, the possibility of being a little bit lost in a fog or haze of idealism. On the other hand, the ability to open yourself up right now to influences bigger than yourself and to really be inspired by them to make changes in your life is also there. Mercury Neptune can be, the influence of a deep meditation session, or the influence of a lover who really tries to bring your attention to something gently, or so the possibility of receiving some loving persuasion in the right direction from an angel or from a friend or what have you, or even a dream, is also possible around the full moon. And really all month long, this theme of needing to make changes and confronting things is there. And maybe one of the questions is, how open and honest are we being with ourselves, right? But for Virgos especially, in terms of your relationships. All right. So last transit of the month that I have is the Venus-Pluto contact, which happens around February 22nd. So Venus and Pluto will get together. This is the goddess of love and relationships getting together with the Lord of the underworld. It's a moment of catharsis again, in depth and intensity, and purging, and themes of power and disempowerment around women might be also a big theme. This is happening again in a good house. It should bring good things, even if there is a little bit of that Plutonian drama to deal with. So watch for that around February 22nd in the house of good fortune. So you want to be careful. One only other thing I'll say about that with Venus and Pluto is you want to be careful of going to an extreme somehow in seeking pleasure or joy, or even in romantic relationships. Just be careful of a more intense and a sort of obsessive, or almost potentially sort of hedonistic impulse. You may need to, sometimes pent up energy needs to be released around Pluto transit, but it can be more intense and there can be more consequences than we bargain for sometimes. So be a little bit careful of that around February 22nd. All right, Virgo, that's what I've got for you. I hope you have a beautiful month. Please feel free to leave your comments on the YouTube page, or email me if you want to tell me any stories about what's happening, nightlightastrology@gmail.com. Okay, take care. We'll see you for March's horoscopes. Bye.